The room was filled with clinking glasses and polite applause when Arthur, my father-in-law and the boss I had served loyally for 3 exhausting years, raised his champagne and announced, "I'm thrilled to name our new regional director, my brilliant niece Lily Monroe." My heart stopped. 8 weeks. That was all it took for Lily to get what I had been promised for 3 long years. Around me, hands clapped enthusiastically, but mine stayed frozen in my lap until I forced them together in slow, deliberate motions that sounded more hollow than the applause. I tried to shape my lips into a smile, but inside something cracked so deeply it almost echoed. If you've ever been overlooked in favor of family politics, if you've ever sacrificed years only to be told you're replaceable, then you know that kind of pain. Before I go on, tell me in the comments, have you ever been betrayed at work or by family when you least expected it? And don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss how this story unfolds. It matters more than you think. Arthur's eyes flicked to mine across the conference table. For a second I thought I saw guilt, but just as quickly it shifted into defiance before he looked away. His voice carried that patronizing tone I had grown to despise as he continued, "Amy has already been such a wonderful mentor to Lily. I know she'll continue to support our new director in every way she can." Support. That single word tasted like poison. For 3 years I had been working 60-hour weeks, building this department from 12 people to 47 winning clients, missing dinners, burning myself out, all for this promotion that he promised was just a formality. And now I was expected to support someone else stepping into what should have been my role. My name was Amy Hayes, Senior Operations Manager, age 42, and in that moment I felt like a ghost inside my own career. Lily stood to accept her new crown, her blonde hair perfect, her designer suit screaming privilege. "Thank you, Uncle Arthur. I'm so excited to learn from Amy's expertise." The words made my stomach turn. Learn from me? Transition into a new phase? This wasn't a transition. It was a hostile takeover. I sat stiffly, every muscle in my body aching from the effort of keeping my mask on while people whispered, offered me pitying glances, or avoided looking at me altogether. Margaret from accounting brushed my shoulder as she passed, whispering, "I'm so sorry, honey." Her sympathy was salt on the wound. I didn't want pity. I wanted justice. By the time the meeting ended and I returned to my office, my legs felt like they no longer belonged to me. My desk still carried my nameplate, my 3 Employee of the Year certificates hung proudly on the wall, but now they looked like cruel jokes. My phone buzzed. A text from my husband Joseph. "How did the announcement go?" "Finally official." I stared at the screen, fingers trembling, before typing the only answer I could manage. "We'll talk tonight." The rest of the day blurred. I sat through meetings, reviewed reports, answered emails, all with that fake professional smile locked on my face while inside I was screaming. My jaw ached from clenching it so tight. At 5 o'clock, as I packed my things, Arthur appeared at my door, his frame filling the space with authority I no longer respected. "Amy, can I have a word?" His voice was warm, like he was offering me a gift. But I already knew. Whatever he said next, it wouldn't change the truth. And that was the moment I realized I had reached my breaking point. Arthur stepped into my office with the kind of false gravity that made my stomach knot even tighter, as if his words could somehow erase the insult he had just stamped onto my career. He sat in the same chair where 3 months ago he had promised me the promotion was only a formality. I remembered the way his silver hair had gleamed under the lights back then, the way his voice had carried certainty when he said, "Amy, you've earned this, no one deserves it more." And now here he was spinning betrayal into something he wanted me to accept as opportunity. He said, "I know today was difficult, but you are incredibly valuable to this company. Lily needs your experience. I hope you'll take on a senior advisory role, train her, help her succeed." And the words cut like a knife because what he really meant was, help her replace you. I kept my voice level even though my heart thundered. "Arthur, can I ask you something? 3 months ago you said this job was mine. What changed?" He shifted. In his seat, his fingers twisting his wedding band like it held the answer. "Business needs evolve. Lily brings fresh perspective. I almost laughed. 8 weeks of perspective against 3 years of proven results. He raised his voice. Amy, you're taking this too personally. And I stared at him, the man who was both my boss and my father-in-law, the man I had respected, admired, even trusted, and I realized he didn't see me at all. He only saw family politics, he said. Family looks out for each other. Lily needed this opportunity. You're secure here, you don't need it the way she does. And in that instant I understood, I wasn't family in the way that mattered. I was the dependable placeholder, the reliable workhorse expected to sacrifice without recognition. I stood, gathering my bag and jacket, muttering something about going home. Joseph had made dinner. Arthur looked relieved. Give my son my love. Thank you for your understanding. Understanding, the word echoed in my mind like a cruel joke. I walked out, my heels clicking against the marble, the sound as sharp as the betrayal in my chest. In the car I sat for 5 minutes unable to move, watching neighbors walk their dogs, their normal lives highlighting how abnormal mine had just become. When I finally stepped inside, Joseph was waiting with his lasagna, but the smell turned my stomach. He saw my face and immediately pulled out a chair. Sit down, tell me everything. So I did. I told him about the champagne toast, about Arthur's tone, about training Lily to do the job that was supposed to be mine, and with each word Joseph's expression hardened, his jaw clenched, his knuckles turned white around his glass. Dad actually said you didn't need the promotion? Word for word, I replied. He shoved back from the table, fury radiating from him. I'm calling him right now. No. I grabbed his wrist, my voice low but firm. This isn't your fight, it's mine. But the damage was already done now. Joseph was angry at his father. Another fracture in the family courtesy of Arthur's decision. That night I barely slept, but by morning I put on my professional mask again. Walking into the office with a fake smile, Lily bounced into my office at 9 sharp, clutching a color-coded planner, her enthusiasm so grating it made my teeth ache. Amy, I'm so excited to learn from you. Uncle Arthur says you know this place better than anyone, she chirped, and I gestured stiffly to the chair. Let's start with the Morrison account. It's our biggest client. For 2 hours I explained, detail after detail, every delicate relationship I had nurtured, every nuance she didn't understand, and she scribbled notes like a student cramming for an exam. She asked what to do if Morrison threatened to pull business. I told her calmly, you don't make promises you can't keep, you listen, you set realistic expectations with buffer. She blinked, confused. But what if he still leaves? I leaned forward. Lily, Morrison Industries is 30% of our revenue. If you mishandle them, 47 people lose their jobs, including you. She froze, her pen stopping mid-scribble, and in her eyes I saw fear, the kind of fear I had carried for years but had learned to mask. By lunch my patience was razor thin, and in the break room as I heated soup, I heard voices through the thin wall, Arthur's booming laugh. The transition is going perfectly, Lily is picking things up quickly. Then Lily's hesitant tone. Are you sure Amy's okay with this? Arthur replied with icy certainty. Amy's dependable, but we need fresh ideas. She's good at maintaining the status quo. But that's not what we need. She's become a crutch for clients, too comfortable. We need to shake them up. Amy's predictable, reliable. She'll do whatever we ask. She has no other choice. At 42 she's too old for fresh ideas. We're doing her a favor by keeping her. My blood turned to ice. I gripped the counter so hard. My knuckles whitened, every word branding itself into my memory. Predictable, reliable, no other choice. I walked back to my office, soup untouched. A new cold fury settling in my bones. It wasn't the hot rage of someone blindsided. It was the calculating clarity of someone who finally sees the truth. For 3 years I had believed loyalty mattered. I had thought if I worked harder, stayed later, sacrificed more, I would be rewarded, but Arthur's words revealed the truth. I was never going to be more than dependable Amy, the safe pair of hands who would never be promoted because she posed no threat. And in that realization, something inside me shifted permanently. I kept training Lily that afternoon, answering her questions, explaining processes, but in my mind every explanation was proof of my own worth, a silent record of the value I had built. And as 5 o'clock arrived I packed my things with deliberate calm. Knowing the days of swallowing betrayal were over, I drove home and sat at the kitchen table, Joseph working late, the house quiet, and I opened my laptop. My fingers hovered for a long moment before typing. Dear Arthur, please accept this letter as my formal notice of resignation. The words flowed steady, professional, final, no anger, no begging, no blame, just a clean exit from the prison of false loyalty. I printed it, signed it, slipped it into an envelope, and for the first time in weeks, I slept peacefully, because tomorrow I would no longer be predictable. I would no longer be trapped. Tomorrow I would take back my power. The next morning I woke earlier than usual, a strange calm resting on me like armor. I dressed carefully in my navy power suit and my grandmother's pearl earrings, every detail chosen to remind me of who I was beyond Arthur's shadow. I arrived at the office before most employees, placed the resignation envelope in the center of my desk, and went about my routine as though it were any other day. Emails answered, reports reviewed, a smile for Tom from accounting when he dropped by with his usual questions. But at 10 sharp I picked up the envelope and walked to Arthur's office. His secretary Marie greeted me warmly. 15 years she had sat at that desk and always treated me kindly. He's finishing a call, Amy, just a minute, she said. I nodded, but inside my pulse hammered. Arthur stepped out of his office mid-conversation, motioned me in, and I sat across from him waiting. When he finally hung up he looked impatient. What can I do for you, Amy? I've got back-to-back meetings until 3. I placed the envelope on his desk, his eyes narrowed, confusion flickering as he slid it open with his letter opener, unfolded the letter, and as his eyes scanned the lines I watched color drain from his face, then flush red. You can't be serious, he thundered, standing so abruptly his chair rolled back. This is a joke, some negotiating tactic? I stayed seated, hands folded, voice steady. I'm completely serious. He began pacing. Amy, we just promoted Lily, she needs your guidance. The Morrison account alone could collapse. You can't abandon ship now. You'll be fine, I said evenly. Lily's enthusiastic, she'll figure it out. His voice cracked. This is about the promotion, isn't it? Look, I know you're disappointed, but we can find another role, more money, a corner office, anything. Arthur, stop. My voice cut through his excuses like steel. I had never spoken to him that way before and he froze mid-step. This isn't about the promotion anymore, this is about respect. About the fact that I finally see the truth. I don't have any here, he sputtered. You're valued, your family. I rose slowly, smoothing my skirt. No, family would have been honest. Family wouldn't have made me train my own replacement without telling me. Family wouldn't have called me predictable behind my back while claiming I had no other options. His mouth opened then closed, his face pale. You heard that conversation. Every word, I said, silence stretched heavy with 3 years of betrayal. Finally he sank into his chair, suddenly older. Amy, please, maybe you misunderstood. I understood perfectly. I turned to leave, his voice desperate. What do you want? Money, title, name it? I looked at him one last time. I want to work where my value is seen, where 42 isn't too old for fresh ideas. And I walked out, Marie's eyes wide as I passed. Everything okay, honey? She whispered. And I smiled for the first time in weeks, a real smile. Everything is going to be just fine. Back in my office I felt light, freer than I'd imagined. The decision made, no going back. I spent the next 2 weeks wrapping up projects, documenting processes, quietly saying goodbye to colleagues who mattered. Everyday whispers grew louder, people glancing at me as if wondering what would happen when I left. The day I walked out with my box of personal items, Joseph waiting in the car, I didn't feel regret, only anticipation. 2 weeks later I was home updating my resume when a call came. From Horizon Tech, Rebecca Chin introducing herself. Daniel Morrison spoke very highly of you. We'd like to discuss a regional operations director role. My heart nearly stopped. Morrison, the very client Arthur had dismissed, the man whose trust one had spent 3 years nurturing, now opening the door to exactly the job Arthur had denied me. I said yes, went through interviews that were direct, respectful, every conversation emphasizing merit over connections. 3 days later I held an offer. 30% higher than Alden ever paid, stock options, benefits, and a title that matched my experience. Stepping into Horizon Tech was like entering a different universe, modern, transparent, collaborative. From day one my ideas were not only heard but implemented. Marcus, the CEO, looked me in the eye after a presentation. They didn't promote you, unbelievable, their loss is our gain. I thrived. Within months, retaining Anderson Group and expanding their contract by 40%. Colleagues sought my input, my department grew. And for the first time in years I woke excited to go to work. But gossip travels fast in any industry. At a networking event I heard Alden Ventures was floundering, smaller clients frustrated, accounts mismanaged. Then came Daniel Morrison's call. Amy, I wanted you to know we're ending our relationship with Alden. Lily missed calls, mishandled crises, treated a multimillion-dollar shipment like paperwork. When I spoke to Arthur, he said if we couldn't adapt, maybe we weren't the right fit. His voice carried disbelief. I closed my eyes, picturing Arthur's arrogance, effectively inviting his largest client to leave rather than admit his mistake. Daniel continued. My recommendation that Horizon hire you was the best advice I've given in years. Gratitude flooded me, but also a pang of sadness, because good colleagues still at Alden were suffering. Margaret from accounting called one evening, her voice trembling. Rumors of layoffs, people say it's because you left, that you took all the clients with you. I reassured her it wasn't about blame. Asked gently if she was seeking other options, she said at 58 no one would hire her. And in that moment I knew what to do. Margaret, can I give your name to Horizon? We'll need experienced financial staff as we grow. The relief in her voice broke my heart. I realized then this wasn't about Alden's collapse anymore. It was about rescuing good people from a sinking ship. And piece by piece Horizon Tech became a haven for those undervalued at Alden. 6 months later an embossed invitation arrived. Arthur Alden requesting my presence at the annual awards dinner. Joseph frowned. You're not seriously going, but I smiled. I am, because I'm not the same woman who left. At the grand ballroom I walked in wearing an emerald green dress, Rebecca at my side. Colleagues stared, some with admiration, others with discomfort. Tom from accounting whispered, things haven't been the same since you left. Margaret's new job inspired us to start looking. 2. Then the lights dimmed, Arthur stepped on stage, older, diminished, his voice hollow. This year has been challenging, but we've learned lessons about leadership and talent. His eyes found mine, and for a moment silence passed between us. Then he announced a new award. Excellence in leadership goes to someone who may no longer be with us but whose impact continues. Amy Hayes, please come to the stage. My stomach dropped. Rebecca nudged. Go on. Walking up felt surreal. Arthur extended a crystal award, his smile strained. Your dedication set a standard we still follow. I took the microphone, looking at the audience, at Lily, pale at the family table. Thank you. Working here taught me many lessons. The most important, loyalty without respect is servitude. Hard work matters only when it is valued. And sometimes the best thing you can do for your career is walk away from places that no longer see your worth. Applause scattered. Uncertain, I continued. Today I work at a company that values merit over politics, where ideas are heard and age is not a ceiling. To my former colleagues, remember, you have more power than you think, use it. I handed back the mic, walked off stage. Margaret began clapping, then Tom, then others, enough to make the message clear. After dinner Arthur approached me, weary. That was quite a speech. If you ever wanted to come back. I cut him off. 6 months ago I wanted your approval. Now I know I don't need it. The company is struggling because you chose family over competence. That's not my problem. I left with Rebecca, Joseph waiting at home. When he asked how it was, I smiled. Perfect, absolutely perfect. That night I placed the heavy crystal award beside a photo from my first day at Horizon, 2 symbols of the same journey, one showing where I had been undervalued, the other proving who I had become. And I realized the truth that burned brighter than revenge. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's becoming the person you were always meant to be. 3 weeks after the awards dinner, when I thought the chapter with Alden Ventures had closed for good, an email leaked from a former colleague landed in my inbox like a thunderclap. The subject line: blunt strategic restructuring effective immediately. The body filled with corporate jargon about cost-cutting, halting new hires, and reassessing major accounts, but hidden inside those sterile lines were names I knew, people I had eaten lunch with, burned midnight oil with, laughed with, in hallways reduced Now to disposable numbers. I sat back staring at the screen, not feeling triumphant, just hollow, because I knew exactly where the fault line began. The morning Arthur crowned Lily the heir to everything I had built. The very next day Margaret texted me they brought in outside consultants, every process under review. Lily asked to present a 90-day roadmap, and Amy, she looked terrified. I pictured her standing in front of a room full of seasoned professionals trying to explain plans she didn't even understand 3 months ago, and part of me pitied her because she was never ready for this role. The phone rang, an unfamiliar number. I answered, and heard a calm male voice introduce himself as Wayne, a board member at Alden. We're reassessing leadership decisions, he said candidly. Your name keeps coming up. We'd like your perspective. I leaned against the window, watching sunlight fracture across car windshields, choosing my words carefully. I said, I don't want to disparage anyone, but the truth is, client loyalty is built over years of consistent trust and discipline. You can't swap that out for a family name without breaking something fundamental. Wayne paused, then sighed. We've learned that lesson in the most expensive way possible. He invited me to a confidential paid consultation session. I hesitated. The last thing I wanted was to be pulled back into their storm, but good people were still on that sinking ship, and I couldn't pretend not to care, so I agreed. One session only, under strict conditions. My recommendations, recorded in writing, anonymous, focused on protecting employees, not reputations. Wayne agreed immediately. That afternoon I logged into a video call with 3 board members, an internal auditor, and a partner from the consulting firm. They asked why in only 6 months accounts once rock solid were now crumbling. I told them bluntly, when you replace a trusted bridge with a blood relative, you don't just change a name, you destroy the crossing. Clients don't respond to titles, they respond to footsteps. They recognize the ones who ran through storms beside them. I gave examples: memos delivered on time, midnight calls solved, crises, promises always buffered by a safety margin. Then I spoke of something you won't find in any quarterly report: respect. You can't teach respect with a slide deck, you either live it or you don't. The meeting ended with a list: create a rapid response team for strategic accounts, freeze all client handoff changes for 60 days, and most importantly, untangle family from accountability. The next day Margaret whispered to me Lily had her signing authority reduced, all proposals now required board oversight. I didn't gloat, I only thought of the 47 employees I had once warned her about. One mishandled decision could cost them their dinners that week. More bad news hit: a transport company filed complaints about delayed payments. The legal team scrambled like children in the dark. Arthur, meanwhile, appeared in a local business magazine, repeating slogans about innovation, needing to stay ahead of the curve, words that once inspired me but now rang like hollow excuses. By Friday, rumors spread that Lily broke down in a meeting. A senior sales manager resigned. Another veteran posted cryptic words about one-sided loyalty on LinkedIn. Joseph poured me tea that night, his brow furrowed. I don't want you dragged back into this storm, he said softly. I know, I answered, but some people don't deserve to be drowned in it. He smiled, placing his hand on my back. Then help in a way that protects your boundaries. So I emailed Rebecca at Horizon proposing we open 3 new roles: finance operations and senior client support. Prioritizing displaced Alden staff. It's both good business and the right thing to do, she replied within minutes. Make it happen. The following week Horizon hosted a quiet open house for potential hires. No publicity, just open doors, yet within hours the slots filled fast. I spotted Tom, his eyes carrying both embarrassment and relief. He spoke about shifting deadlines, approvals stalled, clients alienated by tone-deaf calls. I didn't comment, I simply handed him a printed job description. If you want a place with clear standards, here it is. He looked at the paper like it was a lifeboat. Within a month Horizon onboard 5 new employees, every single one proving their value on day 1. Client calls smoothed out, retention metrics rebounded, our charts lifted like a heart restarting after shock. In a strategy meeting, Marcus leaned toward me and said, we're building the culture others only put on posters. And that sentence hit me harder than applause ever could, because leaving Alden hadn't been abandonment, it had been opening the right door for something better. Meanwhile, dominoes kept falling back at Alden. An investor pulled funding, quarterly reports revealed customer acquisition costs skyrocketing while revenue flatlined. The board called an emergency meeting. Wayne texted me one word: Monday. I knew Arthur would finally faced the reckoning he had dodged for months. That Sunday evening news reached me: Lily had submitted a leave of absence to pursue further training, a polite phrase for retreat. I didn't rejoice, I only felt sadness for a young woman shoved into the sky without stairs beneath her feet. Monday passed, And by afternoon Wayne called his voice heavy. We've separated the chairman and CEO roles. Arthur remains as honorary board member, but a professional CEO will take over. I closed my eyes listening to the city breathing outside the window, the honk of traffic, the laughter of strangers. Realizing a circle had closed, Wayne added, "We should have done it sooner," and thanked me for my guidance for the action plan that had helped them stabilize at least a few key accounts. I told him saving people should always come first. Reputations and profits will follow if you truly change. After we hung up, I leaned my head against the glass, catching my own reflection. Not the Amy who once begged for approval, but the woman who now understood she didn't need anyone's permission to recognize her worth. The next day, an email slipped quietly into my inbox from an unfamiliar address. The message, only 4 words: "I'm sorry, Amy." Signed Arthur. No explanations, no invitations, just a period at the end of a chapter. 1 didn't reply. Silence was my answer. Instead, I opened the draft document for Horizon's new mentorship program I was building. I titled it "Predictable in Results," a deliberate reclamation of the phrase that once stung me, now transformed into my leadership philosophy: stable outcomes, flexible methods, and respect in every interaction. In our first workshop, I told a room of young hires and a few seasoned faces who had come from Alden the story of Morrison, not to boast, but to teach 3 lessons you won't find in job descriptions. Listen like a ferryman, build safety margins before you promise, and name problems earlier than you want. I ended with the line I wish someone had told me at 25: loyalty is a two-way street. If you carry it alone too long, put it down. The room fell silent, then filled with slow nods like raindrops on a roof. That night, Joseph asked, "How was your day, Director?" I smiled. "Today, I didn't take revenge on anyone, I just built a bridge." He laughed. "That's the kind of thing that lasts longer." I thought of the photo on our shelf, the Crystal Award from Alden standing beside the framed picture from my first day at Horizon. 2 symbols not in opposition anymore, but companions in the same story. The phone buzzed. A comment on the video of my story. Someone wrote, "When did you realize your worth?" I typed back simply, "When I stopped waiting for someone else to give me permission." Then added another line, "For anyone sitting in a conference room, hearing another name announced for what should have been theirs, don't make yourself a crutch for someone climbing on your back. If this story resonates with you, share your moment below. Your story may be the light someone else is searching for in a windowless room." By autumn, the collapse of Alden Ventures was no longer whispered in side conversations. It was printed in headlines. Local business journals called it a case study in nepotism gone wrong, while industry blogs dissected every misstep with ruthless clarity. The board's attempt to steady the ship with a professional CEO came too late, because the cracks Arthur had ignored for years had already split wide open. Morrison gone, Anderson gone, 3 more mid-tier clients defecting within weeks, and the dominoes kept falling as service quality plummeted and employee morale bled out. The firm that once prided itself on stability now looked like a hollow shell propped up by denial. One evening, Margaret called again, her voice calmer now that she was secure at Horizon. She said, "Amy, you wouldn't believe the atmosphere over there. Every week someone else packs up their desk. People walk around in silence, waiting for the next shoe to drop. It's like watching a house you once lived in burn from across the street." I closed my eyes, listening, guilt flickering but quickly dissolving into clarity. I hadn't lit the match, I had simply refused to be chained inside. When the fire started, Joseph listened to me recount Margaret's words at dinner, and then leaned back, eyes steady. "You know," he said, "Arthur could have avoided all of this if he had just done the simplest thing, valued the right person at the right time." And I realized he was right. What had destroyed Alden wasn't just Lily's inexperience, it was Arthur's arrogance, his blind faith in blood ties over earned merit. And that arrogance was now public record. Clients were openly telling trade associations they could no longer trust Alden's leadership. Investors pulled out one by one, leaving the once mighty company scrambling for credit extensions. When news broke that Alden Ventures was closing one of its regional offices, laying off nearly 50 people in a single blow, my phone buzzed with messages from ex-colleagues, some angry, some devastated, some asking if Horizon had openings. I forwarded what I could to Rebecca, who was already scaling up departments faster than planned because demand from our expanding client list kept climbing. Marcus pulled me aside one afternoon, saying, half joking, half serious, "Amy, I think you've become our best recruiting strategy." And I smiled, not because it fed my ego, but because it proved a point I had carried like a wound for years. When you treat people with respect, they don't just follow you, they build with 6 months later. Horizon announced record-breaking growth numbers, partly from the accounts we had secured after Alden stumbled, but more importantly from new opportunities that saw in us what Alden never saw in me: reliability, a strength not weakness, innovation grounded in trust not ego. At our quarterly celebration, Sarah from operations raised her glass and said to me, "Amy, you turned predictability into a superpower," and the whole room laughed, but I felt something deep settle in my chest, not bitterness, not revenge, but validation that everything I had once been mocked for was actually the foundation of lasting success. Meanwhile, the downfall of Alden reached its inevitable climax one Friday morning. I opened the business section to see the headline: Alden Ventures files for bankruptcy protection. Arthur's photo stared back, older, heavier, drained of the authority that once filled boardrooms. The article described creditors circling lawsuits pending, clients gone, employees scattered, and somewhere between the lines, the story of a man who bet everything on loyalty to blood and lost everything built on 3 decades of work. That decision alone had toppled an empire. When I finished reading, I didn't feel joy. I felt a strange mixture of sorrow and relief: sorrow for the innocent who had suffered layoffs, and uncertainty; relief that the truth had been laid bare for everyone to see, and that perhaps now no one else would fall for the myth that family politics could outweigh competence. 2 days later, a letter arrived at my house, thick paper, the Alden Ventures crest embossed on top. Inside, a brief note, handwritten. Arthur's shaky script said simply, "I was wrong. I hope you know that." Signed, Arthur Alden. No offers, no manipulation, no request for me to come back, just those 5 words: "I was wrong." Joseph read it over my shoulder and asked, "Are you going to reply?" I shook my head. No reply was necessary because my life had already answered the question. My worth was not up for debate anymore. The months that followed cemented that truth. Horizon promoted me again, this time to Vice President of Operations, expanding my role across multiple regions. I accepted not out of hunger for titles, but because I knew I could create the kind of culture I once longed for at Alden: transparent, merit-based, inclusive. Every onboarding session, I told new hires the same story in simpler words: loyalty matters, but if it's one-sided, it's slavery, and if someone ever calls you too predictable to lead, remember this: results are the most valuable currency in business. Never apologize for being reliable. During one leadership workshop, a young analyst asked me, "Amy, do you ever regret not fighting harder to stay at Alden?" I thought about it for a moment, then answered, "I didn't need to fight to stay. I needed to walk away to grow. Sometimes walking away is the most powerful fight of all." The room went quiet and I saw nods spreading across faces, young and old. They understood, because deep down everyone has a moment when they realize staying silent means surrendering their future. As for Arthur, I heard from Wayne months later that he rarely attended board meetings anymore, preferring to spend time at his lake house alone, the legend of his acumen tarnished by the legacy of one catastrophic decision. Lily, according to Margaret, moved overseas to start over, her LinkedIn-listed consultant, but I suspected it was more about rebuilding her confidence than selling her skills, and I hoped she found a way to redefine herself without the weight of Arthur's shadow. In quieter moments, I reflected on how close I had come to staying trapped forever. Had I swallowed my pride, had I trained Lily smiling through betrayal, I might still be there, fading into invisibility, convincing myself loyalty was enough. Instead, I chose a different path, one paved not with revenge but with self-respect, and in the end that choice not only saved me, it created space for dozens of others to thrive alongside me. One evening at home, Joseph poured me a glass of wine and asked, "If you could go back, would you change anything?" I thought about the 3 lost years, the dinners missed, the stress, the humiliation, and finally smiled. No, because every scar taught me what I will never allow again. Every tear carved the space that now holds joy. Every betrayal forced me to build the boundaries that now protect me. He kissed my forehead and whispered, "Then it was worth it," and I realized maybe he was right. Sometimes pain is the tuition you pay for wisdom. Sometimes betrayal is the seed of freedom. When I lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling, I whispered to myself a truth I would one day share with the world: the best revenge is never about watching them lose, it's about becoming someone they can never diminish again. Winter came with a crispness in the air, and as snow fell outside my office window at Horizon, I realized almost a year had passed since the day I placed my resignation letter on Arthur's desk. The year had felt like a lifetime stretched into 12 months filled with change, growth, and healing. I had gone from overlooked manager to vice president, but more importantly, I had gone from doubting my own value to embodying it daily. Every morning I walked into our glass building greeted by colleagues who Respected not just my title but my presence. I had turned scars into stepping stones, and each new hire reminded me why the fight for self-respect matters the most in quiet moments. I still remembered the day of the champagne toast, Arthur's booming voice, Lily's nervous smile, my own hands frozen in my lap, but instead of bitterness I felt gratitude because that breaking point forced me onto the path where I now belonged. One afternoon Rebecca knocked on my office door. She held a folder in her hand and said, "Amy, we've been invited to keynote at the National Logistics Summit. The board wants you to represent Horizon." My heart skipped. I had spoken in rooms before, but this was different. Thousands of industry leaders, press and competitors all listening. I nodded with a calm smile, but inside I knew this would be my chance to rewrite the narrative once and for all. Weeks later, standing on that stage under bright lights looking out at a sea of faces, I began my talk with a story I had never shared publicly. I told them about being promised a promotion and watching it handed to someone else after only 8 weeks. I told them about loyalty without respect, and how easy it is for companies to confuse dependability with disposability. I spoke about walking away not out of anger but out of clarity, and how that decision had not only saved me but opened the door to building something stronger. My voice carried steady across the auditorium, and I ended with a sentence that had become my compass. Reliable results are not weakness, they are the foundation of trust, and trust is the only currency that never loses value. The room erupted into applause, and as I stepped off stage, reporters asked for interviews, young professionals asked for mentorship, and CEOs from other firms congratulated me not just on my speech but on the truth it carried. That evening, Horizon's name trended across industry feeds, and Marcus patted my shoulder saying, "Amy, you just changed the conversation about leadership forever." But the most unexpected moment came later that night in the hotel lobby when I saw a familiar figure sitting alone. Arthur, his once commanding presence now shrunken in an oversized chair. He looked up, his eyes heavy, and said softly, "Amy, can we talk?" I hesitated, then sat across from him. He cleared his throat and said, "I came here because I knew you would be speaking. I needed to see with my own eyes what I lost." I stayed silent. He continued, "I thought blood meant loyalty. I thought family could cover gaps in ability, but I was wrong. I see now that respect has to be earned, and I failed you. I failed the company." I almost whispered, "Do you regret it?" Arthur, his eyes glistened, "Yes, more than you know. I lost clients, my reputation, but worst, I lost the respect of people who gave me everything." I nodded quietly and said, "Sometimes the greatest lessons come when it's too late." He swallowed hard, then added, "But I want to thank you for proving me wrong in the best way possible. You didn't just survive, you thrived, and that proves everything." I refused to see. I stood then, offering my hand not in reconciliation but in closure. He shook it firmly, his palm trembling, and I said, "Take care, Arthur." Then I walked away, not looking back, because some chapters deserve to end without epilogues. Months later, Horizon continued to soar. We opened 2 new regional offices. Sarah now led one of them, Margaret another, Tom was heading client strategy. Each of them, once overlooked at Alden, now thriving in roles they were born to hold. We had built not just a company but a culture where politics had no seat at the table, where contribution spoke louder than last names. One Friday evening, Joseph and I celebrated at our favorite restaurant. He raised his glass and said, "Remember when you thought losing that promotion was the end of everything?" I laughed softly. "It was the beginning of everything instead." And as I sipped my wine, I realized how true that was. Sometimes what feels like destruction is only demolition clearing space for the future to rise. When we walked home through the cold night air, Joseph slipped his arm around me and said, "So what's next for you, Vice President?" I looked up at the sky where snowflakes spun like stars and answered simply, "Whatever I choose," because that's the real victory. Not the title, not the money, not even the recognition, but the freedom to choose my own path without waiting for permission. At home, I placed the keynote plaque beside the old crystal award from Alden, one symbol of betrayal turned into validation, one symbol of triumph carved from resilience. Side by side, they told the complete story of who I had been and who I had become. Later that night, as I prepared for bed, I opened my journal and wrote one final reflection. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about watching them fall, it's about rising so high they can never reach you again. Then I closed the book, turned off the light, and slept in peace, knowing the chapter was not just finished, it was transformed into the foundation of a life I had built with my own hands, my own choices, my own worth. And no one, not Arthur, not Lily, not any company that failed to see me, could ever take that away again. A full year later, I stood in my Horizon office looking out at a skyline painted gold by sunset, and I realized the story that once defined my pain had now become the foundation of my power. The woman who had been dismissed as predictable and replaceable had become a leader sought after for her expertise, not her last name. The colleagues who once whispered pity behind closed doors now reached out to join my team because they saw that respect and merit could build a future stronger than any dynasty. Of nepotism, I thought of Margaret, who now ran finance with steady hands, Tom, who had reinvented client strategy, Sarah, whose operations team broke records, all of them once ghosts in Alden's halls, now pillars at Horizon, thriving because someone finally saw them not as placeholders but as potential. I thought of Arthur, too, alone in his lake house, reduced to a cautionary tale in business journals. His empire crumbled not because of one bad quarter but because of years of mistaking blood for competence, loyalty for servitude, respect for silence. And I wondered if he finally understood that sometimes the greatest betrayal is not in losing a client or a contract, but in betraying the very people who carried you through storms. Lily had disappeared overseas, her profile vague, consultant nothing more, the golden niece who had once been held up as the future, now a footnote in a story about what happens when you climb ladders built on favors, not foundations. And yet I didn't feel vengeance, I felt release. Because my revenge was never about watching them suffer, it was about refusing to let their blindness define my worth. As months passed, Horizon thrived, our growth exponential, our culture stronger. Every quarter new hires came in bright-eyed and eager, and I made it my mission to tell them from day one loyalty matters, but it must be two-way. Respect is not a bonus, it is the baseline. If you ever find yourself giving everything and receiving only silence, you owe it to yourself to walk away, because walking away is not weakness, it is courage disguised as motion. At an industry gala that spring, a young woman approached me, nervous, clutching a notebook. She said softly, "Amy, your story inspired me. I was overlooked at my company, and after hearing you speak, I finally left. I start a new job Monday, one that values me for my ideas, not my sacrifices." Her eyes sparkled, and I saw myself in her, a reflection of who I had once been. Desperate for validation, trapped in promises that never came, I squeezed her hand and told her, "You don't need to wait 3 years like I did. Learn sooner than I did. Your worth doesn't expire because someone else fails to see it." And as she walked away, I felt tears sting my eyes, not from sadness but from the sheer power of transformation, how one story can light the path for another person. And in that moment I knew this was bigger than me. This was about rewriting what leadership meant, what loyalty meant, what revenge truly meant. One evening, Joseph and I sat on our porch, the air warm with the scent of spring. He asked, "Do you ever think about what life would be if Arthur had kept his promise?" I laughed softly. If he had promoted me, I might still be there grinding 60-hour weeks, waiting for approval that never really mattered. Sometimes not getting what you want is the greatest gift because it forces you to discover what you actually deserve. He nodded and said, "Then maybe betrayal was the only way to set you free." And I realized he was right. Betrayal had been my teacher. Humiliation had been my turning point, respect had been my destination, and now freedom was my reward. One night, as I closed my laptop after another successful quarter, I caught sight of the 2 trophies on my shelf, the Crystal Award Arthur handed me in a strained smile, and the sleek plaque from Horizon honoring my leadership. And I finally saw them not as wounds but as bookends to a story that proved the best revenge is not retaliation but transformation. The best revenge is walking so far into your own power that the people who once doubted you can no longer even reach you. The best revenge is becoming the person you always were, but they refused to see. And that is why I share this story with you, because maybe you are sitting at your own desk tonight reading an email that reduces your years of work to nothing. Maybe you are staring at a family member or a boss who tells you to be grateful for scraps. Maybe you feel trapped, predictable, replaceable, invisible, and I want you to know you are none of those things. You are more powerful than they want you to believe, and the moment you decide enough is the moment your real story begins. So tell me in the comments, when was your breaking point? The day you realized loyalty without respect is servitude. Share it, because your story might be the light that saves someone else from staying too long. And if this journey moved you, hit that like button right now and subscribe, because more stories of betrayal turned into strength are waiting, and together we can remind the world that the best revenge is never revenge at all. It is respect, it is freedom, it is becoming exactly who you were always meant to be. A year and a half after I walked out of Alden Ventures for the last time, I sat in my Horizon office late one evening, the city lights twinkling beyond the glass walls, and I felt something I hadn't known in years. Peace. The scars of betrayal were still part of me, but they no longer bled. They had become lines in a map guiding me to where I was meant to be. Sometimes I caught myself remembering that conference room, the champagne, the applause for Lily, the hollow clapping of my own hands. But now those Memories felt like a different life, a prologue to the woman I had become. I thought of Arthur isolated at his lake house, his empire reduced to ash, and I realized his downfall was not my triumph. My triumph was never about watching him crumble, it was about rising higher than he ever imagined I could. I thought of Lily, whose name no longer carried weight in boardrooms, and I didn't feel anger, only pity, because she too had been a pawn in Arthur's game, a lesson that shortcuts and family strings cannot replace grit and respect. But my focus was no longer on them, it was on the people around me, my team, my family, myself, the culture we built at Horizon, where reliability was celebrated as strength, not weakness, where experience was valued, not dismissed, where loyalty was mutual, not exploited. One evening, Margaret walked into my office carrying a stack of reports. She smiled and said, "Amy, do you realize half our department came from Alden, people who once doubted themselves, now thriving because you gave them a chance?" I looked around the open floor where laughter and collaboration filled the air, and I realized she was right. The very people Arthur overlooked were now the backbone of something stronger than he ever built. Betrayal had scattered us, but respect had gathered us into something unbreakable. At home, Joseph often teased me, calling me his unstoppable wife, and every time I laughed I remembered how he had sat across from me the night of the announcement, gripping his wine glass in fury, wanting to fight for me, and how I had told him, "No, this is my fight now." He watched me transform from someone waiting for validation to someone who no longer asked permission, and he never let me forget how far I had come. And sometimes when I doubted myself, he would simply say, "Remember who you are," and that was enough to steady me. The night Horizon hosted a gala celebrating our record year, I stood on stage not as someone's daughter-in-law, not as someone's placeholder, but as myself, Amy Hayes, Vice President, respected, trusted, free. I looked at the faces of my colleagues clapping, not out of obligation but out of genuine pride, and I felt my chest swell with something pure, not revenge, not even victory, but belonging. Afterward, as I drove home through the quiet city, Joseph asked me softly, "Do you think you finally have closure?" I thought for a moment, then said yes, not because Alden fell, but because I rose, not because Arthur apologized, but because I no longer needed it, not because Lily faded, but because I found my voice. Closure isn't about what happens to them, it's about what happens to you. And in that moment I knew the chapter was not only closed, it was complete. As I placed the new Horizon Award beside the old Alden crystal on my shelf, I smiled, because together they told the truth. Sometimes what feels like an ending is only the beginning. Sometimes betrayal is not the end of your story, but the turning of a page to the chapter where you finally meet yourself. And so if you are listening now, stuck in a place where your worth is overlooked, where loyalty is demanded but never returned, I want you to remember this: walking away is not failure, it is freedom. Refusing to accept less is not disloyalty, it is dignity. And the best revenge is never about their downfall, it is about your rise. So tell me, when was your moment of truth, the instant you realized you deserved more? Share it in the comments, because your story may be the spark that ignites someone else's courage. And if this journey inspired you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and join me for more, because every story we tell here is proof that even in betrayal there is the seed of transformation. And sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply becoming who you were always meant to be.